Welcome everyone to the Security Working Group. Today is the 14th of June, and we will get started. Our agenda is to go over briefly some expectations, and then we're going to dive into SEP number 19, improve running SALTs under user privileged accounts. And Barney, if you want to go ahead and get us started, you want to talk about any expectations you were thinking?
Yeah, sure. Give me a sec. Right. Okay, thanks everybody. Thanks for coming along. I don't know if any of you have already sort of had a look at the charter that we put together for the working group. If you haven't, I will just stick a link to that in the chat in a sec. Essentially, what I think we're looking to try and do is spend some time working on issues that are going to help users of the SALT project get an installation that minimizes the risks for when they're installing SALT, but doesn't really impact on the ability for them to use the full power of SALT. So that's going to look like a number of different potential objectives and goals. I think, as sort of Sage just mentioned, one of the first things we probably want to look at is looking at the SALT packages, so that we can configure those to work with all sort of components working with least privilege, look at sort of file system permissions, groups, and also how we can sort of help people with setting up, have those packages set up sensible groups and ACLs, so that we're actually sort of reducing the attack surface of the SALT master. I think realistically, initially, we're going to want to focus most of our efforts in terms of work on things around the SALT master, because that's certainly likely, or the SALT master and associated components like the SALT API, because certainly those are the sort of components in SALT that are most likely to be exposed to untrusted or less trusted networks. They're certainly the areas where we've seen the most issues around CVEs and so on in recent times. And I think there's probably quite a lot of scope for doing things like reducing privilege, especially in terms of the SALT master, so that we can try and essentially, harden the default installation of SALT, so that if we do have further sort of CVE issues, we find that for most users, those are essentially already mitigated by our standard configs and standard setup. And then also to try and work on some ideas around how we help users who perhaps do need to sort of stray from the standard configs, work out ideas for how we can help them, harden the installations that they're doing to use the different components. So yeah, I mean that's sort of roughly speaking where I think we should be starting. There have been some other ideas in terms of some, people wanted to perhaps look at the SALT minion a bit more. I think certainly my feeling is that we can probably get the sort of easiest or the most initial wins from looking at stuff around the SALT master and SALT API, and how we sort of harden those and reduce the privilege of those. We did also talk about doing some work around the sort of security release process, and how we might sort of be able to contribute to that as well. So yeah, I think that's a sort of basic introduction. But if you have a look at the working group, the working group charter, which is
If you got it, I think I've got the link right here. There you go. It's in the
beautiful.
screenshot.
Yeah, so I mean that covers in a bit more detail things I was just talking about. So yeah, if you're not already done so, take a look at those. I also talked a little bit on, there was a user group meeting, which was, when was that, 2 or 3 weeks ago. I talked to cool.
Yeah, does anybody have anything else? Any other detail expectations you want to go over? Since we're still sort of forming, I know it's kind of high level, we'll dig into more, I guess, minutia of what that looks like as we go. Let's see if we can get some issues written on the board. There's a project board at the org level. It doesn't have much on it at the moment as we're still sort of forming and looking at what those tasks will be. I do hope to get some time to put the some more details there and links. I haven't had a chance to do that yet, but I'll take that as an action item for next time and make sure that that's a little clearer between those two, between the project board and the charter. And where meeting notes will.
Is the project board actually set up?
Yeah, it is. Let me grab it. It's pretty blank, but I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, thanks.
And that should be available to everybody. I don't think that's private or anything. Shouldn't be.
Folks, I just read through the proposal and it looks fine. One thing what I think we should at least consider is the so-called like pseudo-based minion execution. I don't think it's a part of the agenda. What's like the opinion on this approach in general? Like to not run minions from root, but run them from user which could use sudo to escalated privileges.
No, we don't have it initially called out in the charter. I did think that as SEPs came in that warranted this group's attention, we would do those as such. I guess we could put that in as some expectations that we sort of want to have the goal of this group to review those. And
yeah, I mean, that approach, I think at least should be reviewed because like at the current point of time, I'm not sure if it's like makes sense because of the cell design, basically.
Sure. Yeah, and today we're hoping to, I think, to really dig into that, but I don't necessarily have that written on the expectations. I don't really have expectations written out, which I think I was planning on doing that more in the project board and then linking back to sort of that overall group charter. And I can put some notes in about that as well. Is the board private? Okay, let me go change that.
No, I think I was just looking at the, I don't know what I did, but I.
Oh, okay. I was trying not to make things private.
I think, oh no, I was looking in sorts of community projects and then.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, this one's at that org level because I thought there may be more that we want to link to for issues throughout other repositories. So I made it at that level and we could always move that. I just thought this was probably a better level.
No, it's fine. I just looked at the wrong place and couldn't find it.
Sure. Yeah, should we dive into the pseudo user and SEP19?
Okay, so what's in terms of sort of finalizing how the SEP looks, because there's been quite a lot of comments going back some way. What's the sort of normal process in terms of getting, deciding which of the comments and how we're going to proceed?
That's a good question. I think that we could probably take them somewhat one by one, or if we want to group some of them together, I think that's fine. The the process for the SEPs has been sort of however seems appropriate for whichever SEP. We probably need to align better. In fact, Gareth and I were talking about this just last week, that the way that the comments are written is probably not exactly efficient to move forward with the way we have this document that's sort of been drafted, and then to just leave comments sort of in a discussion like manner, but to really come to some sort of consensus. And maybe we need to as a group, as a core group, maybe set forth a really good example. And we could also do that here if people want to sort of voice that. I think there's a lot of different ways we could go and say that this would be more efficient to get to an answer for each question that comes up, or this is sort of a standard way to do it on a whole. I tend to prefer to use the PR process within GitHub and to pull down, the user's fork and make those changes as a suggestion in a branch, or to their branch, so that it's easier for them to either accept or change. That's just me. I'm open to other ideas though on how people see that being more efficient, especially as we're at the discussion period where we are now. Maybe we take notes and we could link to that in a comment and then have a final sort of discussion period where we make those changes in that way, where we're pulling in that branch and making them. This one is, I think, more long-standing, so we probably may want to start there where we take some notes today and then give our answers as we come to that rough consensus. Does that sound all right?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. I will be the scribe. People want to, I'll attempt to be as fast as you guys talk.
Okay, has everyone got the SEP up in front of them? SEP, yeah, SEP 19, isn't it? Shall I share that? Okay.
Sure, or do we also want to move to some of the comments?
I had a quick, I guess it's a kind of a comment on the question.
Do we have? Sure.
So I was just scanning through the SEP, and it mentions like the bulk of it is, my understanding is running various services that traditionally run on the master. So like Salt API, Salt Master, probably like proxy minions, other things like that, as non-root users. But it also goes into the paths for various like salt files. I'm just wondering, like, my initial kind of quick scan impression is, I wonder if this is more, this should be broken out into more than one step. Just curious what other people's thoughts on that were.
Yeah, from David Murphy's first comment, I know that we were definitely thinking that maybe it had at least two parts, in favor of, like running salt without root privileges, and then also running services, right? Do I have that right?
No, I was thinking more of like, so it mentions, I think running the various salt services as, I apologize, my robot vacuum's attacking me. Running the services like Saltmaster or Salt API, those as non-root users. I think that's one step, but it also mentions, like, just caught a quick glimpse of it, changing the default path for where Salt keeps its
Gotcha.
configuration file, things like that. I'm wondering if that portion of it should be in its own step.
So just to mention that we at SUSE, one of the patches that we are maintaining is about switching the user for the Salt Master and Salt API service to a particular Salt user that we create when we install the RPM. And that's how we run the Salt Master and Salt API services on non-root since time ago already. Of course, the Minion is a different problem because Minion needs to run as root or at least be able to get root for doing operations, right? But this is not like that for the Salt Master API. As soon as the bar cache, Salt folders, and everything has the right permissions for this other user, then we are fine. Yeah.
Sorry, folks. Connectivity issue there. Cool. So sorry. I'm actually just going to turn off the video. Cool. Can people hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, so there was some discussion regarding the paths. I think there was actually a comment in the set later on where somebody suggested. So I'm just getting that up in front of me. Yeah, because there was a discussion about moving to XDG style paths and so on. And I think Sage actually said on 19th of Feb, after discussing this set with the core team, we'd like to separate out changing the location of salt files into a separate SEP. I mean, I think, sorry, I didn't see who sort of raised the issue about that, but are we sort of, I don't know, are people vaguely agreed that we should keep the issue of config files as a separate issue to sort of config file location as a separate issue to looking at users and groups and privilege? I think that probably makes sense.
Yeah, it looks like it was David Murphy that made the initial comments about that. I hadn't scanned down far enough to see the comments yet. So cool.
Yeah, and it looks like Sage talked to the core team and they all agreed with that as well.
Yeah.
So we probably just need to write the second SEP. This original SEP was written by, is it Damon Atkins, is that right? Or maybe it was the Loki. Yeah, Ronald. Yeah. And anyone can do that. Maybe we just need to do that here. We could even just break that out. Maybe I'll even ask David if he would be willing to draft it. If anyone here also wants to work with him, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, do we actually think that the changing the location of the config files is something we want to focus on now at all, or because
That's a good question. I sort of was thinking we could say that it would be another stuff that we could talk about later and dive into as that gets written. Does anybody have more they want to discuss there though? We can. I think there's some specific things related to other non-Linux OS config files that they were thinking, like for Windows specifically. And so we'd probably want to weigh in with some of those other groups, like the Windows working group and maybe the Mac working group, if there's other things that they would like to weigh in on a stuff like that as well. Perhaps.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay. I'll definitely see if I can get that drafted up and get that to the other groups as well. And then we can bring it back and sort of, as that evolves into a SEP, we can review it here again, see if there's anything more we need to discuss. Okay. So we can table that one for now and then discuss it later. What's next?
Okay, so I mean, how do people feel about I put a comment in on the 2nd of March saying that I think we should probably sort of reduce the aim of the SEP, which I guess goes along with the configuration, separating out the configuration files SEP into separate SEP to be running the Salt Master and API as unprivileged accounts, and also allowing users to run the CLI clients, so Salt Run, Salt Cloud, Salt P, CP, etc. as non-root users, and then to essentially set groups up to allow users to easily sort of specify who locally can run those clients. So have like a Salt clients group so that people can, once we've installed Salt, add people to that group and give people permissions to run those clients. And I think that will also be a way in which we can handle things like writing to Varlog Salt, because certainly at the moment that's sort of one of the issues, is running the Salt clients as a non-root user, is that they still expect to write to the log files in Varlog Salt. And then obviously the other thing would be good to do around that would be to sort of set some sensible sort of publisher ACL defaults, so that we're sort of guiding users into how to give people different sort of levels of privilege, rather than the sort of current, if you have access to Salt, it's, you can run any module, you have essentially full access. So I don't know if anyone has any sort of opinions on that.
I'm not sure really like maybe I not fully understand the question, but like this full publisher ACL external CL situation is like, to our experience, is not well documented and hard to use. And we as an organization actually really want to use it more broadly. And if it could be more documented and tested in the common CI, what will be a really nice goal for this group.
Okay, that's good to know. So what do you have an idea sort of currently, or could you easily put together perhaps a list of some of the issues you've been seeing with that, and perhaps we can look at, Yeah,
I'm going to. Actually, I'm doing the POC right now.
Excellent. That's great.
Yeah, like the main issue with our POCs, like in our organization, we actually deploy Salt differently. not from YAML packages. We use like deployment in pip in the separate account, running it from node root, and some of our examples could be not really relevant to the rest of the community. So just like a heads up.
Okay. So I think the other thing, just looking at the comment I put on the set, was that previously one of the reasons, I think in a previous step that was talking about reducing the privilege of the salt master, or reduce, not running the salt master's route, one of the issues raised was around PAM and external auth. Essentially, if the master doesn't run as root, then using PAM in external auth is slightly problematic, because you obviously need to be able to read etc shadow. Now, I don't know, actually, maybe some of the SUSE people would could pipe up on this. I know that various distros have some workarounds for that. So you can add you can make some services, I think, add them to the shadow group that does have read on etc shadow. That's sort of one workaround I've seen. I guess the slightly more complex workaround would be to actually try and separate out the functionality the functionality to authenticate using Salt, either into a separate process that had higher privilege. I don't know what. I'd be interested to hear sort of what people's experiences are, and whether or not people have sort of strong opinions about the best ways to go about that.
I don't actually know how if we have a workaround for that. So etc shadow is owned by group shadow on our systems, but I don't know. I don't think we add our salt user to that. So I think for our packages don't work with PAM at the moment. But Papa, do you know more?
Okay.
No, I cannot tell you at the moment.
Okay. I mean, I guess then with that, we should probably just actually try that as an approach, and essentially test it out, see if we had any issues with that, or if I don't know if any of the sort of packaging policies for any of the distros would have issues with us adding the salt master to the shadow group. I mean, it's still, as I see it, it's still better. Although obviously, you have the issue that if the master is compromised, it can read all your hashed passwords and it sets the shadow. It's still a lot better than it running as root. So yeah, I guess we just try that as an approach and see if that works reasonably. Because I think the other approach of trying to sort of separate out some sort of separate process for authentication is probably adding quite a lot of complexity at this stage.
There's actually one going through the unresolved questions. There's one that caught my eye about grains. So Salt Master, we ran into that. Salt Master is loading some grains, and some of them, or at least we had a new one that we read, and then we had failures because we don't run as root, and that couldn't be read. So I wonder how many we have, but we can, at least one of them there is, that we had to add a workaround. Basically, I mean, if it fails, then skip it and not just throw a backtrace. But yeah, I wonder if we have a list of, I mean, we can go through our patches that we have and see if we patched that for grains, because we definitely had at least one of those issues. I think last time,
We-
Bunny, you asked what we did for packaging for Salt to enable the Salt user, like the non-root. And I'm not sure how many patches we have that are related to that. So we have 2 for the configuration files for Salt Master and Salt API. And then we have at least 1 for the grains, but I don't know if there's more.
But is that for running for grains? Is that not in the context of the minion rather than the master?
No, that's in the
Is that-
context of the Salt Master. So there are
Okay.
grains that are read by the Salt Master. This was about something under boot, I think.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
So yeah, that's something that there's at least one of them that did not gracefully fall or fail when we. I think we added that because of the transaction update patch we did.
Okay. Okay. Right. I'll just try sharing my screen again. Hopefully that will not totally break things. Okay. So just looking at these other comments then. Yes. I had suggested that we should exclude for the minute salt minion and salt call as they're going to require running as with. I have some comments disagreeing with that, and I think this as well. What are people's thoughts in terms of, for the moment, just focusing, on doing this with the Salt Master rather than actually trying to do anything in terms of the Salt in running it as non.
I think we lost Barney.
So I think we did. Welcome back, Barney.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm gonna have to give up on the screen sharing. That's yeah. So in terms of what people's feelings on sort of excluding trying to change the user and privilege of the Salt minion, I don't personally think it makes sense to try and do that at the moment. I think on the majority of systems, the Salt minion is going to have to be sufficiently privileged in order to make any changes. I think that we're much better focusing on the Salt Master or Salt API processes that are definitely don't require root privs. Does anyone have any sort of strong feelings on that?
Yeah, I was going to say I tend to agree. I think ideally we'd want to get to a place where like you could lock down the minion, but as I would call on your comments in the SEP where you said if the master ends up being compromised, it doesn't matter how locked down the minion is because your master is going to control the minion. So yeah, I think I think their better focus is on Salt Master, Salt API, Salt SSH, Randy just mentioned, and some of the other things, and then maybe later minions come later. I think for the most part, like the standard setup for a minion should have root privileges, because the more you lock down the salt minion, the more complicated it is going to be for people to use it, for people that have that expectation of the minion being able to do stuff that it traditionally has to do as root. And there's going to be, it's more of a barrier to entry versus a solution, like a security solution.
Yeah, I totally agree. One thing that did just, sorry, a couple of things. So yeah, Randy, Salt SSH, absolutely. There could be some low hanging fruit there. I think the interaction with Salt SSH and the Salt API is definitely something that we, want to be looking at, because if you're running essentially the Salt API as root and then calling Salt SSH, certainly you're then essentially taking some sort of untrusted or semi-trusted input and trying to turn it into command lines running as root, and obviously that's that's not always easy to sort of deal with all the edge cases and not end up with shell injection vulnerabilities or other bugs. So yeah, absolutely. I think looking at Salt SSH would be good. No, sorry. The other thing I was actually just going to say though, about just very briefly back on the minion and privileges or what users. I really don't have very much experience with running Salt minions on Windows. I don't know what the current situation is in terms of what user accounts the minion runs as under Windows, and whether or not that is in a situation, because obviously the sort of user and privilege model in Windows is quite a bit different. So I don't know whether or not it's the case that the Salt minion user that we're currently using under Windows may be something that could be slightly less privileged than it is currently and still have the same functionality. Yeah, I don't know about that part of it at all.
As Sage had mentioned, engaging the Windows working group as well as the Mac working group before. That's expertise we could pull from them.
Cool. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so is there anything else we want to discuss then on SEP 19? Does anyone else have any issues that haven't been sort of covered by either what's currently in the SEP or the discussions we've had on the existing comments?
I know we said we don't touch the config file locations, but in some cases it's a bit tricky. So for example, for Salt SSH, it expects the keys, I think by default under master subdirectory, under etc salt pki master SSH. And there we had one user running into a problem there where he created, or the first time he used Salt SSH was as root, and then later on as Salt, and then couldn't read the keys, of course, because they were created as root and we don't only for the user and not for anyone else. But having this, I mean, if you run Salt SSH as a different user, then I guess we need some other location for that, for those keys, not under etc salt pka master. So I don't know, maybe this is probably why people started adding these config file locations to the SEP because it's related in some cases at least.
Yeah, okay. Could that yeah, okay, I guess you'd probably want to separate. I was going to suggest we could perhaps make that directory writable by the relevant group for the for salt SSH, but actually is that that's just in itself for salt master PKI directly, is it? I can't quite remember the location.
Yeah, it's PKI master, but yeah.
PKI master, okay. So that's shared with the salt master, and actually we probably don't want to be necessarily making that writable by people running salt SSH if we want to try and maintain some separation. I mean, there's presumably there wouldn't be any particular reason why in the salt SSH case we couldn't separate that out into a different directory, because the normal salt master process doesn't actually need those keys for any reason. So but yeah, I hear what you're saying, that we may end up essentially changing some config locations. I think initially we probably just need to deal with that on a case-by-case basis, rather than saying that we should entirely rethink the sort of config hierarchy and which particular standard for config files we're using. And I think we can probably solve the problem slightly more simply than that initially.
Yeah, I think that should work. I mean, we can handle the SSH case, for example, by just moving it up one level, I guess, and then it resides next to master and etc salt PKI. So without going through all the way we have the config file layout.
Yeah.
Has anyone used Heist instead of Salt SSH, and how that may differ?
I've tinkered with it, but I haven't really dived into the code to see how they handle privileges and escalation yet. So
Yeah,
something I'll definitely look deeper into.
because as we look at Heist work and how that is sort of just done better, not that it would have to be pluggable, just wondering if the differences there, and as we update Salt SSH and bring focus back to that, because there's definitely some things to fix there. We've wondered how much of the Heist code base should maybe get lifted and shifted, or how we want to take from it the best parts. So I didn't know if that if anybody has even played with it here. It's still sort of new, so it may not be able to dive into it too much.
I think that lift and shifting Heist code over to Salt SSH is breaking the expectation that SSH should be used as the transport for the entirety of the job.
Sure, I guess I'm talking about more like pieces of it that are working better, not necessarily like the whole thing and making it part of Salt, but
I mean, I could dive into both code bases and see where they diverge and which paths would be better, but that would take a little bit of time.
Yeah, we can also ask Megan for her opinion on that too here, and get that more readily. But I think it'd be interesting if somebody has used it. But if you haven't, not a requirement, just wondering.
Okay. Yeah, I'll dive some more into it.
Cool.
Okay, so unless anyone has any other comments on this, should we work out essentially who's going to take the existing step and make some changes to it?
Sure.
Is that a reasonable way to proceed on this? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm happy to do that, and create a new pull request for that, or to just check out the existing branch and then do that.
Sure. Yeah, if you want to take that on, Bernie, I think that'd be great.
What is there is a packaging working group, isn't there? Or am I getting that confused with the release working group?
There's a release working group that is mostly packagers, and then the salt sort of release team within core, and we've worked closely on setting up how like CVE releases and security fixes are going to affect packaging. It's called the release working group.
Packaging is within the scope of that working group, though. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
And how? Sorry, I'm not. Are the packages the sort of salt release packages currently built with salt package PKG? Is that the tool that's being used for those?
Yes. Bryce, I guess you can talk more to that. We're also doing some Tiamat stuff as well.
So salt-PKG is the Tiamat build of salt. The salt pack Pi3 and salt auto pack and stuff like that on GitHub is the way we're doing it for the current ones on repo.saltproject.io.
Salt SSH is bundled into that, though, if that's your question.
No, what I was wondering is how for the different distributions that are supported, where we're going to presumably end up in situations where we may, if we start to create different groups for salt, there may be presumably distribution specific sets of groups for things, or ranges of UIDs. Does existing tooling essentially handle all of that, or is there anything additional we would need to do? Because obviously at the moment, essentially, everything is built. Everything is owned by root and run as root. Is there anything in the tooling to handle the different ways in which the different distros that are built for might have standards in terms of UID ranges, GID ranges, if we end up using the shadow group, this sort of thing? Sorry if that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, so for the most part, and it's a little bit shared in the Tiamat build, but it's easy to split that out if we need to. Every distro has their own pipeline config, stuff like that. We can have it unique to the particular distro version.
And in the release working group, there are also packages from the distribution world, so from different distributions, who do their own packaging on top of what Upstream has available for different distributions. So we can also communicate with them and ask them what they do. I mean, for example, we at SUSE, we have, I think the group is called Salt, and the user as well. But yeah, I mean, we are already here, so we can coordinate that.
So Tiamat is what's underneath Salt PKG, and you can include external directories, full files, so on and so forth with Tiamat builds. So adding in specific distro requirements is totally doable. Typically package builds with Tiamat, if you're doing solely Tiamat, are then built by FPM. So there's additional stuff you could add there. That's kind of how we do things here at GoDaddy, is we include the specific distro files with the FPM build. Otherwise, the SALT code itself is effectively compatible with any ELF linked distro that is newer than the glibc version that the package was built on.
Okay. Okay, so I think I'll do some work on sort of reworking the SEP, and then I guess from that we would probably end up with trying to add some particular tasks in the project. So I think we need to work out how we can break this down until we sort of finalize the SEP. I'm not sure we can actually do that just now, but I think that would be the next step after this.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I have anything else on SEP 19. Do we have? Are there any other issues anyone wants to sort of talk about, or any other ideas that we've not sort of covered
So
in the initial intro?
I'd like people's input on, we've used the same signing key for all of the Linux packages for ever since we've started, basically. Do we want to rotate that key at some interval? What should that interval be? I was thinking of introducing new keys along with new distro versions, like when Ubuntu 22.04 comes out, start using the new key with new, anyways, however long, like say we have a new key every 6 years or something like that, introduce it so that a given distro version always uses the same key throughout its life. Anyway, I was curious opinions on that.
Do you have a process in mind for how you would essentially rotate the keys? Would you I mean, I guess you'd actually just be relying on people when there's a new version, downloading that key and adding it however their package manager sort of requires that to happen.
Yeah, so I figure on when they're upgrading their distro anyways, they're already gonna have to change their repo file to point to the new location. They can just grab the GPG key at the same time. That would be a low impact way of rotating the key.
Folks, you will probably not like this, but I think the current state of things is it would be like really cool if SALT could integrate with Vault, HashiCorp Vault PKI system and let the Vault do the heavy lifting of this whole PKI situation. I mean, optionally, obviously, but it will help a lot, I think, in that particular case, for example.
So we currently store our GPG keys for signing in Vault.
Yeah, I mean, but imagine if like SALT will not optionally implement it, so like for this issue certificate, sign certificate, all this logic, and just rely on Vault to do it for both like masters, minions, and everything like this, and could automatically rotate them, make them short-lived, and all these features. But it's a huge change.
Would that integrate into package manager as well, or just?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, that's what I'm saying optionally. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think on the one hand, yeah, there really should be a process for rotating the keys, because if you now lose the key, even though you have it involved, but if something happens, someone else gets access to it, you need to rotate it anyway, or you want to, because then otherwise people can't trust it anymore. And the other one is, well, how do we do it? I think for SUSE it's a bit different because we have OBS and we can do a lot of things like in there, and I don't have to worry about it because it's just done automatically or by our security team for the official keys, I think. But for our so for our Uni, our well salt-based data center management tool, we install third-party distribution keys with packages basically. So to pre-trust the official CentOS keys, for example, and when we do that. So yeah, that would be another way to have a package with the keys in there, and then user can update that. So if you already have the keys, but then you could probably update them before you have to rotate them.
Kind of wonder if it'd be good if we started a document like this group on what we want to do with that.
Should we write it as a SEP, or do you want to? We probably could start just a draft document before a SEP if we want to put it into like some cards into the project board.
Yeah, that would work.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Well, we are at time, just a bit over, but this has been really good. I have a few follow-ups and actions, and I have some notes I'll get into the community file in the repo and post this recording. This has been really good. We'll have a little bit of follow-up, and if people have questions, please let us know, and we'll work towards some of these things, see if we can get these questions, the SEPs answered, and push that through and into acceptance, or if we want to reject it. I think that's also something this group can help decide. All right, well, thank you, everyone. Happy Monday. See you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.